Okay, so here we are on our office.com portal, a part of our Office 365 subscription. Here we can see all of the apps that are available to us through our Office 365 subscription. So we see things like Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Yammer, and as well Forms is down here, a green icon with sort of a checklist and the letter F. If you don't see it here in the quick launch, you can also click this link, explore all your apps, and the website will show you all of the tools available to you through your Office 365 subscription. So let's go ahead and click on the Forms icon here. It opens in a new tab. Now this is going to be quite bare page. Just in this example, we haven't added any forms or quizzes, and nothing's been shared with us or available through our Office 365 groups. But let's go ahead and make some new forms and quizzes, and I'll show you all the different question types available to us. Okay, so we're going to click here on the New Form button, and it's going to pop up an untitled form with no questions. And let's go ahead and hammer a few items onto here, including a title. You can add a photo to the header if you'd like, but we'll skip that step for now. You can add a description. And let's go ahead and add some questions now. Clicking the Add Question button is going to pop up a menu here with a bunch of different question type choices. Let's spend some time going through each one. So first, let's add a choice question. And this is a simple type of question where you can add your question text here at the top. You can add an image as well for this question again, and then you can have a multiple choice answer. Now you've seen here that artificial intelligence is at work on the Microsoft Cloud. Because we've asked a question, what is your favorite color, and we've started filling in some answers, the system is actually going to give us some suggestions for alternative answers. So it makes creating this form even easier. And we do have some options down here as well to add an other option if one of our pre-populated options does not fit our bill. And then you can further on down here allow for multiple answers. You might want to make this question mandatory by turning on the required field. And clicking the ellipse here is actually going to give you even more settings for this question type, where you can shuffle the options. So each time the form is loaded, it's not going to show in the same order, which is good for tests because a lot of students study the order that the answers are in. Instead of having radio buttons for each of the different colors, we could have a drop-down menu. And subtitle for those that need different accessibility options, or if you do include images or videos as part of your questions, you may want to add a subtitle as well. Now before we go and add more questions to our form, I just want to scroll back to the top of this question. We do have some sort of action items here, action buttons that you'd probably come to expect. You can copy this question, you can delete this question if you want to remove it from your form. And once you have a few more questions, you'll be able to reorder these forms very easily by moving the questions up or down using these buttons here. Let's go ahead and add the next question. So the next type of question is a text question. These are good for long form answers if you want to get someone's opinion, if you want to collect feedback in more of a paragraph type of format. You can add that text type of question to your form. Okay, let's go ahead and modify this text question now on our form. One good scenario, one good example of use for Microsoft Forms may be for collecting employee information, say on their quarterly evaluation. And a text-based question that you might ask on such a performance appraisal would be something similar to, what are your goals for this quarter? And because we expect our employees to give us a very long answer or a very detailed answer, we can select the long answer button here, and that will just allow for more text to be collected by the form. Perhaps we will turn required off on this one. And then we do have the availability to set restrictions on this answer. So not for this particular example, but if you were asking a question around how many children do you have, how many pets do you have in your household, if you want the system to restrict that to a numeric response, or if you want the system to restrict greater than, less than, those types of operators, you can certainly do so. So let's add the next question type is the rating question. These are lots of fun because you can use the graphically stars to represent a 1 to 5, 1 to 8, 1 to 10 rating scale, or you can use a number scale as well. So let's go ahead and ask a question. We're just going to stick with a 1 to 5 scale. We'll make the question required, and clicking on the more options here, you do have the availability to add labels. So this is helpful if you don't want to reverse the order of a 1 or 5 or what's good and what's bad. You can actually give labels to what a 1-star review is, and you can give labels to what a 5-star review is. All right, let's keep moving on. Let's add another question here to our form. The next available question type is a date type. So pretty straightforward here what we can ask for. And the system will automatically pop up a calendar type of question where the user can select a date. Maybe we won't make this question required. Let's check the other options here. We only have the options to subtitle this, so not a lot of extra choices when it comes to the date question. Fairly straightforward there. Let's go to the next one. Now we only see the first 4 here, but if we do click on the More button, we have 3 more question types. We have a ranking question. Let's dig into this one here next. Okay, so let's continue on with our staff lunch theme here that we're working on. Now the ranking question will show the respondent a few different answers and allows them with their mouse or scrolling on their fingers on their mobile devices to reorder a list of options to set their preference, for example. So let's keep on here. So just a quick example of entering some data there. Again, we do see as we move along graphically, as we click on different fields, other icons and other actions that we can take. So we may want to delete an entry, we may want to add another one. Let's flip over here to the additional options. Again, is only subtitle, and we can make this a mandatory question. It's pretty straightforward there with the rankings. I'll show you what this actually looks like when we're done. So just bear with me as we continue to add questions to our form. Again, we'll click on More, and let's use the Likert. Now, Likert is a very interesting question type. If you've ever received a telemarketer call, rest assured that you had a Likert question before. Basically, these are the questions where you're asked or you're read a statement, and then you need to somewhat agree, slightly disagree, disagree strongly, those types of things. So let's go ahead and fill that out here just to give you an example. Here's a Likert question completed with all of the questions and all of the responses. So my sort of question, my ask for this question is, how do you agree with the following statements about our last staff lunch? And then we have the questions here on the left. Our last staff lunch was a great way to meet colleagues, and the venue for our last staff lunch was accommodating to my needs. So you can strongly agree, maybe only partially disagree, you may feel neutral, you may agree, you may strongly agree, and clicking the plus icon here will actually add an option 6, so you can have as many options or whichever scale that you do want for your respondents to answer in. Now here I just want to show you adding media to the question, to the top part of the question. You can add images and videos if you'd like, so if you'd rather have the CEO asking each of these questions in a video or presenting different options in video, that's certainly possible. For an image, you can just add certain things to sort of spice up your forms and keep them looking creative. So because we're talking about parties, let's just add a nice party graphic here. And so that's the Likert question. There's not really more available to us for settings for these questions. Again, you can make the question mandatory, and you can provide subtitles. So if you are adding a video, if you want to add subtitles for those with disability or accessibility requirements. So the last question type we have available to us here on the forms is the Net Promoter Score question type. So if you've ever received a survey or a performance review, perhaps from a a particular vendor of yours, they may ask you how likely you are to recommend their organization to a friend or colleague. Certainly if you're any part of a large organization, your HR department has likely sent you a survey. For example, here, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? And then you're assigned a scale, very similar to the other question types we've looked at as far as the rating and ranking style of questions. The Net Promoter Score is just another way to represent this information. So here, again, 0 to 10 scale, 0 being not likely at all. We can change this field as we wish. Extremely likely to recommend. No additional options here other than subtitling. And again, we can copy, delete, and move these questions up and down. So maybe we want to move this question closer to the top. Clicking this up arrow a few times has now made this question third on our form. Now, as we're working along building out our form, because we are using a web app tied to Office 365, you don't have to worry about saving constantly. You don't have to worry about losing your work if you do close your browser or accidentally move to a different website or a different tab. Everything's saved within the seconds as you make changes to your form. So let's go ahead now. A few more action buttons here at the top. Let's check out the preview again. This is a good way to see what your form is going to look like and what all the different questions are going to look like on your form. You can actually go ahead and enter text and select the different buttons just to see what happens. Here's the calendar date entry that we mentioned. Here we can reorder pizza, pasta, tacos. Here's our question with the picture, and here's the submit button down at the bottom. Now, really cool because this is done in responsive design. When you do send a link out for your survey or your form or your quiz, as I've mentioned, your users can answer and reply back on any device. So this is a preview, obviously, in a computer browser. But if you want to see what it looks like on a mobile phone, we are given that preview here. So you can see exactly what your survey or your poll or your quiz is going to look like. I'll just click back here. Now, one other cool thing, as I mentioned, a lot of creativity, a lot of availability to customize and make these forms and quizzes your own. Microsoft's given a few sort of pre-built themes here, background images and color themes, those sorts of things. You certainly can add your own if you want to bring in your own business logo or your own business color to keep branding consistent. Obviously, if you're sending this out to customers, you'll want to make sure it looks like it's coming from your organization. So we'll just we'll pick the space theme. I quite rather like space. The last button up here on the top is the share button. Now, a few options that we do have here before we send out a link. If you want to keep this survey internal, so that would be anyone within your Office 365 organization, you would leave the only people in my organization can respond setting checked. But if you do want to send this out into the big wide world, you can select the option here, anyone with the link can respond. And then this is your link here. You can copy it to your clipboard, or you can embed it in your website. You can generate a QR code that people can scan, or you can drop it right into an email and send that out. So if you're using any type of marketing automation, or if you want to include a form in your weekly newsletter, monthly newsletter, again, you can just take this link, copy and embed that into your code, and you're off to the races. Now, you can also share this as a template, so if you want to have a standard type of form, maybe your sales team or your HR team will reuse a form over and over again, you'd want to save that as a template. Or you can share this out to a colleague if you are in HR, but you want the CEO to approve before the survey goes up to your employee base. You can certainly do that here because it's Office 365, very, very simple to share. All right, so a few more things I want to show you before we go and look at some responses and how we can collect and analyze the data coming back on our survey. I'm going to click the More Settings button here at the top ribbon. We have the availability of branching. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. If you are up to speed on quiz design and survey design, you may want to use branching. And just to give you an example, if you have a respondent answer, maybe a yes/no question, do you have pets? And they respond yes, that may prompt them for another question, how many pets do you have at your home? Something like that, and where if they say no, you'd want to skip that question that asks them the quantity of pets. So branching is helpful, sort of an if-then type of setup for a lot of question styles within surveys. Last here is the settings button. This is the settings for the form. Again, because we've already set this to being a public survey, anyone with a link can respond, but we can change that setting here. We do have some other options for responses as well, like start date, end date. We can shuffle the questions so that they're different, or we can lock the questions so they're always the same. We can customize a thank you message, so let's take a minute to do that here. And then we can have a notification where respondents get this thank you in an email, or me as the form creator can get an email every time someone responds. So you may want to set that up for marketing as an example. Every time a customer does complete questions on a survey, the marketing department would get an email to analyze the results. So now we have the opportunity to review the responses to our form survey here. So from the main form page, from this particular forms spot, we can click on the responses tab, and that's going to show us the number of responses, the average time it takes our respondents to complete the survey, and its status. Now we have a few more options here as well. We can sort of wipe out and start from fresh. We can print a summary, or we can create a summary link. So if you do want to share this information around your team, or maybe just with the CEO who just wants a real summarized view, you can do that with that link. We do have the option to open this data in Excel, perhaps for further manipulation. And then here we can go into each question and see really what's going on behind the scenes and how folks are responding. So here we can see that the blue response to what is your favorite color, which is ironically a orange column here on this chart. We can see that 2 people responded that is their favorite color. Yellow and orange are tied at 1. So quickly, sort of visually, we can see at a glance the response to those questions in that particular chart type. What are your goals for this quarter? That was one of our long sort of text entry questions. We had 4 responses to that. And here in this case of this question, the form is just going to show you the last few responses. So find a toonie. This particular user added a lot of text about using Office 365, survive a zombie apocalypse, for example, just having some fun. Here's the Net Promoter Score question. We have 1 promoter, and we have 2 passives, and we have 1 detractor. If you'd like to know more about Net Promoter Score, NPS, for sure take a quick trip to Google and learn up on Net Promoter Score. Again, the idea being with that question is how your users respond. If they respond high, again, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 on that scale, they're considered a promoter. If they answer 7 or sort of middle of the pack or fairly neutral, they would be considered a passive. And then if they answer low on that scale, they're considered a detractor. So a very interesting type of question. By all means, head over to Google or Bing and search up Net Promoter Score to learn more. Rate our last staff lunch. That was our rating, sort of our 5-star review question. Again, we had 4 responses, and this is an average review of those 4 people. So maybe a couple of them answered 2 or 3, and a few of them answered 4 or 5. So the algorithm here is just averaging up those responses. When should we have our next staff lunch? That was our date selector, where the calendar popped up and allowed users to sort of pick their preference. So looks like of the 4 people, 3 of them agree that March 25th, 2019 is a good time for a staff party. Rank your preference for party food. Now this was the Likert, where you could reorder the preferences. So we would randomly show tacos, pasta, and pizza, and the user would be able to drag and drop those into their preference. So here we see taco is the first choice for 75% of our respondents. Pasta was the first choice of 25%, and it was also the third choice of 25%, and pizza was the third choice of 75%. So, a really interesting style of question that you can get some interesting insights about certain data. And then our last question was, how do you agree with the following statements about our last staff lunch? And this was the question style where you could strongly disagree, feel neutrally about a statement, agree or strongly agree. So one of those very typical telemarketer style questions. So here we see in a chart quite graphically how these folks are responding to that type of question. And we can click on the more details here. That's going to pop up. If we were collecting usernames, now that only works if you're sharing your form internally inside of your Office 365 teams or groups. It would actually collect the username unless you turn that option off. So here we can see all 4 of our respondents were anonymous, so we don't identify their names. And again, same here, rank your preferences for party food. That question, all of the data is anonymized. Okay, let's jump back now to the main Forms dashboard by clicking the Forms button here in the top left. And now we can see this home screen has changed a little bit because we do have a form available to us here. It's going to show, so that's a quick link to get back into that form. As well, we have the More Options button if we want to copy this form, we want to delete this form, or we can move it into different folders to different groups and different sharing capabilities as well. So let's go ahead now and look at the quiz side of Microsoft Forms. Now, the forms for sort of collecting survey data is quite straightforward. For quizzes, really the main difference is right and wrong. So if you are answering quiz questions incorrectly, you as the forms creator have the availability to sort of prompt the user for wrong response messages or correct response messages. We also have the availability of adding points to certain questions. So if a respondent answers correctly, they get 10 points, and you can score up their quiz at the end. So let's go ahead here and create a few quiz style questions. So through the magic of TV here, I've gone and added a multiple choice question here to an Office 365 quiz, just for an example. The question is, which of the following are Office 365 plans? I've given 3 different choices here as options. I've turned on the multiple answers button, which means more than one of these will be correct. So here, as we hover over each answer, we see a trash can to delete that option. We see a text bubble to add text that displays to the respondents who select this answer, and then we have the ability to mark which answers are correct. So in this particular question, Business Essentials is correct and Business Premium is correct. And maybe we want to say to the user who selects Business Awesome, something to the effect of being incorrect. Now, because this is a quiz, let's make it a required question, and let's assign 2 points if the respondent gets this question correct. Now, since this is a quiz, not all question types are really going to fit a rating. You may want to rate the quiz at the end of it. Date is tough because it doesn't allow you to pick a correct date, so you're better off making a multiple choice if you want to say when is the date of Canada Day, or when was Confederation, for example. Ranking may still help, and Likert may still help as quiz type questions, because you can reorder things by setting the correct order. You can assign points there. But really the last sort of common quiz type question is just a straight up text answer. And again, you can add correct answers, and the system will do its best to make sure the user is typing in something that you have positioned as the correct answer. And certainly essay type questions or long form, point form responses can be accepted as well. And here we do have the availability of adding a point scale to a long form text question. Now here I've gone ahead and added a question: what tool is included in Office 365 for creating quizzes? And I've gone and added a couple correct answers like Microsoft Forms and Forms. Again, just making sure that we cover all the bases in what our respondents may potentially answer. I've left the points indicator at 2. And just to show you again the real academic appeal behind Forms, something like turning on the math selector, we can add equations. This takes me back to high school math, so we won't spend a lot of time here, but really interesting academic appeal to Microsoft Forms is still front and center when you're adding questions on the quiz side. So back at the main screen here in Forms, I just want to show you one last thing as far as moving and deleting forms. I've gone ahead and created sample form number 2. just to show you that you can go in here and delete this, and you'll be prompted to move this form to the recycle bin. We can go ahead and do that. And the notion of moving forms, just to show you, again, clicking the More Settings button and collecting Move. We do have the availability of moving these quizzes, tests, forms into our Microsoft Teams. So these are teams that my particular demo user is involved with on Teams and through SharePoint. So we can move this quiz into each of these or any of these different teams we may be a part of. As usual with our Office 365 webinars, it wouldn't be complete without showing what's new in Microsoft Teams and how that integrates with other pieces of Office 365, including Microsoft Forms that we've covered today. So just to give you an example, here I'm in an HR team and we want to go ahead and add that form for the whole team to see. If we click on the plus icon to add our add-ins and we select Forms from the option menu, here we do have the availability of adding a brand new form, which we can name and kind of go through the process of setting up, or we can add an existing form. So we do have our Office 365 quiz, we do have the sample form that we made previously in this webinar, and we can collect responses through Teams, or we can show our results through Teams. And we'll just go ahead and click Save here, and forms will load up. And again, here's the same results that we covered just a few minutes ago on our sample quiz, and that would be available for everyone to view within the HR Notices team. Right on, so we've really only scratched the surface of Microsoft Forms. There's a lot of power behind the tool, yet it is very simple, very quick to build forms, quizzes, and polls. You do have a wide selection of question and answer types, making them required or mandatory, having a lot of fun with the different styles of questions and what you can expect for answers from your users, from your respondents. Awesome analysis tools, again, those graphs and charts, being able to see how the majority of respondents are voting, picking dates and times, those types of things. We've shown the Office 365 integrations for sharing. Again, you can keep your forms, documents, polls, quizzes, and surveys. You can keep those private inside of your organization, or you can share them out to customers, vendors, the general public, through your website, through an email, through your newsletter, for example, or through a QR code. Your respondents can use any browser on any device, so I've shown you only really what the web view looks like, but you do have the availability of seeing what your quiz would look like on a mobile device. And really it boils down to being a fun way to keep employees, students, or customers engaged with your organization, with your department, or with your team.